Everything has a beginning, and our story starts long before the TV cameras showed up. My dad, Richard Harrison, who everyone came to know as the Old Man, was the real visionary. He was a Navy man, a veteran who spent 20 years serving his country. After he got out, he tried his hand at real estate, but the market took a turn, and he lost a good chunk of money. That's when he decided he needed a business that was recession-proof. He figured that no matter if the economy was good or bad, people would always need cash. And that's the simple, honest truth behind the pawn business. It's one of the oldest forms of banking, after all. So, in 1981, my dad packed up our family and we moved to Las Vegas. This was a city built on dreams and taking chances, so it seemed like the perfect place for a new start. He opened his first shop, a tiny 300-square-foot place called Gold and Silver Coin Shop. It was located on Las Vegas Boulevard, but not the glamorous part you see in movies. It was a bit of a rougher area back then. I was just a teenager, but I was right there with him, learning the ropes. He taught me everything about the business, from spotting a fake Rolex to understanding the value of old silver dollars. It was a tough education, but it was the best one I could have ever asked for. The early days were not easy. We worked long hours, 7 days a week. The shop was small and we dealt with all sorts of people from every walk of life. You learn a lot about human nature standing behind a pawn counter. You see people on their best days and on their worst days. My dad was a master at reading people and negotiating a fair deal. He believed in being firm, but honest. He always said, if you treat people right, they'll come back. And they did. We slowly built a reputation in the neighborhood as a place you could trust, which is the most valuable currency you can have in this business. I was a kid with a passion for history, and that started to shape the kind of business we were building. While my dad was focused on the gold, silver, and jewelry, I was fascinated by the stories behind the items people brought in. An old coin wasn't just metal, it was a piece of history you could hold in your hand. A vintage toy wasn't just plastic, it was a memory from someone's childhood. I started to push for us to deal in more than just the typical pawn shop stuff. I wanted our shop to be a place where history was bought and sold every single day. That was the seed that would eventually grow into what the world sees today. Growing a business is like building a house, brick by brick. After a few years at our first small location, we were doing well enough to think bigger. The problem was, Las Vegas had a law that limited the number of pawn licenses in the city. It was a strange rule, but it meant we couldn't just open a new pawn shop wherever we wanted. We had to wait for a license to become available, and that didn't happen very often. My dad checked with the city officials every single week for years, asking if the count had changed. They told him they'd call him when a license was free, but he never trusted that. He was persistent. Finally, our big break came in 1988. The city's population had grown, and they decided to issue one new pawn license. Because my dad had been so persistent, we were the first in line. We secured the license and opened the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop at our current location, 713 South Las Vegas Boulevard. It was a much bigger space and it gave us the room we needed to expand our inventory. This was a huge step for us. We went from a tiny coin shop to a full-fledged pawn shop. We could now handle bigger items and a much larger volume of customers. It felt like we had finally made it to the big leagues. The new location was a game changer. It was still on a less glamorous part of the strip, but it had much better visibility. We started to get more foot traffic from both locals and the occasional curious tourist. I really leaned into my love for history and unique items. We started buying and selling things you wouldn't find in any other pawn shop. We had antique firearms, rare books, vintage guitars, and all sorts of weird and wonderful collectibles. Our reputation grew beyond just being a place to get a loan. We became known as the place to find something truly special, a kind of museum where everything was for sale. As Las Vegas grew, so did we. The city was transforming into a global entertainment capital, and we were right in the middle of it. More tourists meant more potential customers and more interesting items walking through the door. We became a destination in our own right. People would hear about the crazy stuff we had and would make a special trip to come see our shop. It wasn't just about pawning your grandfather's watch anymore. It was about the thrill of the hunt, the possibility of discovering a hidden treasure on our shelves. That's when I knew we had created something more than just a business. We had created an experience. You can't talk about the history of this shop without talking about the old man. My dad, Richard Benjamin Harrison, was the heart and soul of this place. He was the one who took the risk, who laid the foundation for everything we have today. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, you listened. He had a gruff exterior, but he had a sharp mind for business and a strict code of honor. He was from a generation that believed in hard work, discipline, and doing things the right way. He never cut corners, and he expected the same from everyone who worked for him, especially me. His philosophy was simple: know your numbers and be fair. He could calculate interest in his head faster than most people could use a calculator. He understood the value of precious metals and diamonds down to the penny. He wasn't interested in the stories behind the items like I was. For him, it was all about the bottom line. Is it real? What's it worth? How much can I sell it for? This approach was the bedrock of our business. It kept us profitable and stable, even in the early days when money was tight. He provided the stability that allowed me to take chances on the more unusual, historical items. The old man was a permanent fixture in the shop. He sat in his chair in the back, watching everything like a hawk. He didn't miss a thing. Customers knew him, respected him, and sometimes they were a little intimidated by him. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to run a business. But beneath that tough exterior was a man who cared deeply about his family and the legacy he was building. He taught me that a handshake and your word were binding contracts. In a city like Vegas, where things can be flashy and fake, his old-school authenticity was something people trusted. Even after the show made us famous, he never changed. He still came to work every day, wore his classic black suit and hat, and kept an eye on the bottom line. He grumbled about the crowds and the cameras, but I know he was proud of what we had built. He got to see his small, risky idea turn into the most famous pawn shop in the world. He passed away in 2018, but his presence is still felt in the shop every single day. His principles of hard work, honesty, and discipline are the rules we still live by. The gold and silver pawn shop is his legacy, and we work hard to honor it. When we first started, the business was mostly about jewelry, gold, and silver. That's the bread and butter of any pawn shop, but I always knew there was a bigger world out there. I was a history nerd, a bookworm. I spent my youth reading everything I could get my hands on. So when people started bringing in things that weren't just shiny, I got excited. An old sword, a first edition book, a piece of memorabilia signed by a famous person. To me, these things were far more interesting than a simple gold chain. They had stories, and stories have value. I started to actively seek out these kinds of items. I went to auctions, read collectors' guides, and talked to experts. I wanted to turn our shop into a place where you could find anything, from a Roman coin to a guitar played by a rock star. It was a risk. These items are harder to value than gold. Their worth is based on rarity, condition, and demand. You have to really know your stuff, or you can lose a lot of money. My dad was skeptical at first. He preferred the certainty of an ounce of gold, but he let me try, and slowly, it started to pay off. Our reputation as a buyer of unique collectibles began to spread. People knew that if they had something strange or historical, we were the ones to bring it to. This changed the entire dynamic of the shop. We were no longer just a place for people in a tight spot. We became a destination for collectors and history buffs. It was a treasure hunt. You never knew what would walk in the door next. One day it might be a Super Bowl ring. The next, it could be a document signed by a US president. This variety made the job exciting and kept us on our toes. This focus on collectibles is what really set us apart from every other pawn shop in the country. Most pawnbrokers stick to what they know: jewelry, tools, electronics. We went in a completely different direction. We built a brand around knowledge and history. We became the guys who could tell you the story behind your great-grandfather's Civil War medal, or the value of your childhood comic book collection. This expertise became our most valuable asset. It's what made people trust us, and it's what ultimately caught the attention of television producers. Our love for history turned our little pawn shop into a cultural institution. Some of the most valuable things that come into the shop are also the smallest. I'm talking about coins and currency. My dad's first shop was a coin shop, so this has been part of our DNA from the very beginning. People often overlook the change in their pockets, or the old bills tucked away in a drawer. But sometimes, those small pieces of metal or paper can be worth a fortune. It all comes down to rarity, condition, and historical significance. A simple quarter from 1932 could be worth thousands if it's the right one. It's a world where tiny details make a huge difference. One of the most interesting areas is old American currency. For example, people bring in silver certificates, which were bills from the mid-20th century that you could actually exchange for $1's worth of silver. Most are only worth a little over face value, but some, with special serial numbers or printing errors, can be incredibly valuable. We once had a series of star notes come in. These are bills printed to replace a faulty sheet, and they have a small star next to the serial number. Depending on the year and denomination, these can be highly sought after by collectors. It's like a treasure hunt printed on paper. Then you have the coins, which is a whole universe in itself. We've seen everything from ancient Roman denarii to Spanish pieces of 8 recovered from shipwrecks. But some of the most exciting finds are American coins. Take the 1909 SVDB Lincoln cent. It's a penny, but it's one of the most famous rare coins in America. The S means it was minted in San Francisco, and the VDB are the initials of the designer. They only made about 484,000 of them, and they can be worth over $1,000 even in circulated condition. Finding one of those in a collection is always a great day. What makes these small items so fascinating is the history they represent. A coin that was minted in the 1800s has passed through thousands of hands. It's been used to buy bread, pay a soldier, or been saved in a jar by a child. It's a direct, physical link to the past. When someone brings in a coffee can full of old coins, my job isn't just to see if there's a rare date. My job is to unlock the history inside that can. Every coin tells a story, and being able to read those stories is one of the best parts of my job. You learn that sometimes the biggest treasures come in the smallest packages. Over the years, we've seen some truly incredible things come through our doors. It's hard to pick just a few, but some deals just stick in your memory forever. One of the biggest and most complicated deals we ever made was for a collection of 17th century Spanish silver. It was from the shipwreck of the Atocha, a galleon that sank off the coast of Florida in 1622. The seller had bars of pure silver, each weighing over 70 pounds. Valuing something like that is complex. It's not just the price of silver, it's the historical value, the provenance, the story. It took a lot of research and negotiation, but we eventually made a deal for a huge amount of money. Another time, a guy walked in with a guitar that he said belonged to Mary Ford, the wife of the legendary guitarist Les Paul. It was a beautiful 1961 Gibson SG. The story was great, but in this business you can't buy the story, you have to buy the item. We had to do our homework. We brought in an expert who examined the instrument, checked the serial numbers, and looked for evidence to connect it to Mary Ford. In the end, everything checked out. We bought the guitar, and it was an amazing piece of music history to have in the shop. It's moments like that, when you get to hold a piece of history, that make this job so special. It's not always about the high-dollar items, though. Sometimes, the most memorable deals are the ones with the most interesting stories. I remember a man who brought in a set of original engineering drawings for the first ever Fender Stratocaster guitar, signed by Leo Fender himself. The seller's father had worked with Leo. These weren't just blueprints, they were the birth of a rock and roll icon. The seller was emotional about letting them go, but he needed the money. We made a fair offer, and he was happy they were going to a place where they would be appreciated. That's a big part of what we do. We're custodians of these historical artifacts. And then there are the ones that get away. A guy once brought in a collection of original sketches by the artist Maurice Sendak for his famous book, Where the Wild Things Are. They were absolutely beautiful, and I knew they were incredibly valuable. I made a very strong offer, but the seller had an emotional attachment and a high price in his mind. We just couldn't meet in the middle. I still think about those drawings. You can't win them all, and that's a lesson you learn quickly in the pawn business. But the thrill of the chase, the possibility that the next person through the door has the next great treasure, is what keeps you going. A business is only as good as the people who work there, and we've been lucky to have a great team. Of course, there was my dad, the old man, the patriarch who started it all. He was the foundation. Then there's me. I'm the history guy, the one who loves the weird and wonderful stuff. I handle a lot of the negotiations for the rare and unusual items. I've spent my whole life in this business, and I've tried to learn something new every single day. My passion is finding the story behind every item that comes through the door. It's my job to know a little bit about everything. Then you have my son, Corey, who everyone knows as Big Hoss. Corey represents the next generation. He started working in the shop when he was just a kid, cleaning jewelry and polishing silver. He's learned the business from the ground up. He has a great eye for modern collectibles, things like high-end sneakers, designer handbags, and modern electronics. He's the one who keeps us current. He and I don't always see eye to eye on business decisions, which makes for some interesting discussions. But he's a smart manager and knows how to run the day-to-day operations of the shop, which is a huge job. And of course, you can't forget Austin Chumley Russell. Chumley was Corey's best friend since childhood, and he started working at the shop years before the show began. A lot of people see him as the comic relief, and he is a funny guy, but he's also got a surprising amount of knowledge, especially about things like pinball machines, video games, and sports memorabilia. He connects with the customers in a way that's all his own. He might seem like he's not paying attention, but he's learned a lot over the years. He's family, and he's a crucial part of the shop's personality. Behind the scenes, we have a whole team of people who make the shop run. We have jewelry experts, appraisers, security guards, and a staff that handles our massive inventory and online sales. When the shop became a tourist attraction, we had to hire more people just to manage the crowds and sell merchandise. It takes a small army to keep the gold and silver pawn shop running smoothly every day. Everyone from the person at the front door to the expert authenticating a painting plays an important role in our success. We're a family business, and our team is an extension of that family. I always thought our shop was interesting. I knew the items were cool, and the negotiations were fun to watch. For years, I pitched the idea of a TV show about a pawn shop. I went to different networks and production companies, but they all turned me down. They said, "Who wants to watch a show about 4 fat guys in a pawn shop?" They didn't get it. They didn't see the history, the drama, and the humor that walked through our doors every single day. I was about to give up on the idea completely. Then, a production company came to us. They had seen a short documentary about the shop and were interested. They decided to film a pilot, and that pilot eventually became Pawn Stars. The show first aired on the History Channel in 2009, and our lives changed overnight. We had no idea it would become such a massive hit. Suddenly, our little family business was being watched by millions of people all over the world. The show struck a chord with people. It was part history lesson, part family sitcom, and part Antiques Roadshow. It was a formula that just worked. The success of the show transformed our business in ways we could never have imagined. The line to get into the shop started wrapping around the block. We went from being a local pawn shop to a major Las Vegas tourist destination, right up there with the Bellagio fountains. People didn't just come to pawn things anymore. They came to see us, to take pictures, and to buy souvenirs. We had to expand the shop, build a new retail area just for merchandise, and hire a lot more staff to handle the crowds. It was a whirlwind. The show also had a huge impact on the pawn industry as a whole. It helped to change the public's perception of pawn shops. Before Pawn Stars, a lot of people thought of pawn shops as shady, dark places. Our show brought the business into the light. We showed that it's a legitimate business run by knowledgeable people. We taught viewers about history, about how to spot fakes, and about the art of negotiation. We made pawn shops cool. It's amazing to think that our little shop in Las Vegas ended up defining an entire industry for a new generation. When I look back at the journey, from that tiny 300-square-foot coin shop to the world-famous landmark we have today, it's pretty incredible. It all started with my dad's simple idea to start a recession-proof business. He just wanted to provide for his family. He never could have dreamed that it would turn into this. The legacy of the gold and silver pawn shop is built on his foundation of hard work and honesty. Those are the principles that have guided us through all the changes, from the quiet early days to the craziness of global fame. Our impact, I think, goes beyond just being a successful business. We've become a part of American culture. We brought history into people's living rooms in a way that was fun and accessible. We showed that a dusty old book or a tarnished silver coin isn't just an object, it's a key that can unlock a story about the past. We encourage people to look at the old stuff in their attics and basements in a new light. We sparked a curiosity about history in a generation that might not have been interested otherwise. That's something I'm incredibly proud of. The shop today is a very different place than it was in the 1980s. It's bigger, it's busier, and it's a lot more famous. But at its core, it's still the same family business. We still stand behind the counter, we still negotiate deals, and we still get excited when something amazing and historic walks through the door. The cameras might be there now, and there might be a line of tourists outside, but the heart of the business hasn't changed. It's still about the items, the stories, and the people. We're still just a family of treasure hunters. What does the future hold? Well, you never know what's going to come through that door. As long as there are people with interesting things and amazing stories, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop will be here. We'll continue to adapt, to learn, and to share our passion for history with the world. My dad's legacy is secure, and I hope that my son, Corey, will continue it for another generation. We built more than just a pawn shop. We built a place where history is alive. And that's a legacy that's worth more than all the gold in Las Vegas.